George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was born in Stuttgart in 1770 and was part of a generation of genius in Germany that included Beethoven and Goethe. He was a contemporary of the German idealist philosophers Johann Gottlieb Fichte and Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph von Schelling. Hegel's mission was to create a single system of philosophy that made sense of the whole of reality, a unified theory of everything.
Getting into Hegel is difficult precisely because of his genius. His central claim is that the true is the whole. He's a holist, and he believes that no parts can be understood in isolation from the whole to which they belong. And his own philosophical system is a wonderful example precisely of that. He's developed it in such a way that all of the parts hang together and relate to one another. And it's, any place you reach in and pull out a string, you're into the thing, but there's a sense in which until you see the whole picture, you can't fully understand any of the parts. And it's a big picture.
In many respects, Hegel's thought was a continuation of the German idealists whose work preceded his, notably Schelling and Fichte, who themselves were reacting to Immanuel Kant's revolutionary reformulation of philosophy. Kant's legacy was monumental and included the notion that our minds are explicitly designed to enable us to understand the world of experience. What lay beyond the world of experience was, by definition, unknowable by the categories of the mind, a realm which Kant termed the noumenal. What could be known through the senses he called the phenomenal. We never experience the noumenal realm, because the categories of the mind apply only to the phenomenal, not to the world in itself. The German idealists argued that if we know that the noumenal exists, then we in fact do have knowledge about what Kant deemed unknowable. Specifically, that it does indeed exist. Furthermore, how could a thing in itself cause our sensations, as Kant believed, without giving us any knowledge of the noumenal realm? These objections led the idealists to the position that whatever is knowable. Following this analysis, Hegel believed that reality is rationality, that our minds and the objects we interact with every day are expressions of the same logos, or principle of intelligibility. For example, when we look at a pencil, what we are seeing is the collection of our ideas about that pencil. It is yellow, long, sharp, and so on. These characteristics, called universals, don't exist independently of the pencil. Their being is in the pencil. The pencil is what we know of it, nothing more. Broadening the scope of this analysis, Hegel believed that the world as a whole is the product of an absolute mind. The absolute, known from a theological perspective as God, is disclosed in nature and in thought. Everything that happens in the world is a progressive self-unfolding of the absolute, what Hegel called the idea. The idea is developed, objectified in the world, and then returns to itself as it's being understood through human history. Put another way, the universe comes to self-consciousness in human thought.
To recognize reason as the rose in the cross of the present, and to find a delight in it, is a rational insight which implies reconciliation with reality.
Like nature and human thought, the absolute is a dynamic process of unfolding that follows a logical structure known as the dialectic. The dialectic follows the mind's natural inclination to move from the general to the specific. In some instances, the first moment can be described as a thesis, whose contradiction is an antithesis. The third moment is the synthesis, in which the idea and its contradiction are brought together into a new thesis, starting the process anew. Hegel's first dialectic was that of being, nothing, and becoming. Hegel called being the original featurelessness which precedes all definite character and is the very first of all. The natural antithesis of being is, of course, nothing, the negation of being. The third movement in the dialectic is becoming, the synthesis of being and nothing. Something can be and not be at the same time, only by becoming. Moving methodically forward in this way, Hegel applied the logic of the dialectic to much of human culture, including art, religion, philosophy, ethics, and politics. He conceived of history itself as an ongoing process of the unfolding dialectic, the ultimate outcome of which is freedom. The Hegelian system suggests an intimate identity between the absolute and the human spirit. But the balance between the two terms of this equation is unstable, leading to deep divisions among those who would follow in Hegel's footsteps. For some, the task of philosophy was to understand man as a divine manifestation. For others, to understand God as a human production. In Hegelian philosophy, everything is connected eventually in the idea as the absolute. It is a great reconciling synthesis, one which Marx, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, and others would react to in very different ways.
And Hegel is always making the claim that philosophy must be and can be knowledge in the strongest sense of the term. That implies that you have to get the totality, you have to get the completeness, you have to get to the end. And it seems to me that this is Hegel's most vulnerable point, because as soon as he says this is the totality, someone's going to come along and say, but you left this out. And he will respond, well, I mentioned something about that along the way. And then the response will be, but the way in which you mentioned it, you subordinated it to a horizon in which it wasn't allowed to be itself. So Marx will say that about economic life, and Kierkegaard will say that about religious life.